Chapter 95. Samar 5. Vakan wolves were monstrous wolves that lived in the Samar rainforest and possessed startling agility for their large size. On top of that, they even had poisonous glands that secreted paralytic venom on the inside curve of their long claws. First scratching their prey with their claws and then tearing into it once it stopped moving was the preferred hunting method of these Vakan wolves. The natives of this rainforest knew how to tame monsters. That went for the Garung tribe as well. These Vakan wolves, which had received training from the moment they were born, had no inhibition against carrying the tribal warriors on their backs. These tamed Vakan wolves were easily able to race through the complex forest terrain like it was a flat plain, before lunging at the tribal warriors' prey and sinking in their claws and fangs. When the wolves charged at him, Eugene stood up on his rock. The wolf running at the head of the pack leapt into the air and threw itself at Eugene. It first attacked him with its claws rather than its fangs. Flash. A spray of blood fell from the air. A stone column had burst up from the ground and pierced right through the wolf's body. The wolf let out an agonized cry, but the warrior who had been riding on top of the dying wolf just kicked off of its back and leapt towards Eugene. Kia! Letting out a shrill cry, the warrior thrust his spear at Eugene. Eugene still had yet to pull out a weapon. He reached out with just his bare hands and caught hold of the spear in midair. Pulling on the spear with one hand, he slammed his other fist into the native's face before they even had time to let out another cry. Eugene's fist made the warrior's whole face cave in with just one blow. Ignoring the now sprawled-out warrior, Eugene grasped his stolen spear in both hands. The blade of the spear was glistening, but it wasn't the gleam of metal. The spearhead had been coated with the Vakan's wolves' paralyzing venom. With a smirk, Eugene jumped down from the boulder. The wolves were no longer charging at him and had instead come to a halt. Boom! The stone column collapsed back into the dirt, sending the wolf it had impaled sprawling onto the ground. Although the wolf was still barely breathing, it wasn't far from death. A wizard. Among the warriors, it seemed that there was another one who knew how to speak the common language. He narrowed his eyes and glared at Eugene. The warrior barked out, "Garung's warrior. Killed him. I'm pretty sure he's still alive though," Eugene pointed out. This was the truth. Although his face had pretty much collapsed inward, the native was still alive. While letting out indecipherable groans, the downed man was writhing on the ground. "No. You killed him. He no fight anymore," the warrior spat out in his slurred common language as he shot glances at the other warriors. The warriors who had been riding on the backs of their wolves started to dismount onto the ground. Eugene felt the mana in the air begin to fluctuate. Just because they were tribal warriors, the Garung tribe weren't opponents that he could take lightly. These tribal warriors possessed enough skill that they were even able to assault the lavish escorts hired by the wealthy merchants and nobles who visited Samar. An ominous sound blew through the forest. The ground began to tremble. The warriors lowered their bodies as they tensed their muscles. Eugene glanced down at the ground. So they're using spirits of the earth, he realized. The natives of Samar were adept at both shamanism and spirit magic. With how close they were to the dense forest where they were born and raised, it was almost like they were loved by the forest itself. This was a disadvantage for Eugene. Trying to prod any initial movement out of the earth using magic was a very tiring affair. However, the earth was much more responsive to the persuasion of the spirits than it was to having magic cast on it. "No, this isn't just an earth spirit," Eugene corrected himself. There was something else mixed into it. Something that wasn't quite mana. Eugene's lips twisted into a frown. "It has a nasty taste to it," Eugene grunted. This feeling was somewhat similar to black magic, but the essence of it was different. These tribal warriors weren't using demonic power like a demon folk or a black wizard would. They were using the power of shamanism. The wolves' bodies suddenly drooped as the monsters' souls left their bodies and entered the warriors. The warriors trembled and the ominous noise grew even louder. While spitting out the nasty taste in his mouth, Eugene readied his spear. Bang! The warriors kicked off the ground. Their movements seemed to be a blend of both human and monster. It had already been disgusting enough sensing the monsters' souls overlay the warriors, but their movements caused Egwene to recall some unpleasant memories. They resembled the death knight created by placing the soul of a lycanthrope into Hamel's corpse. Boom! The air itself was torn apart as the spear that Eugene threw ripped one of the attacking warriors into shreds. When Eugene returned to the riverside, Nerissa was folding the clothes instead of Christina. Why are you making her do that? Eugene questioned Christina. I'm not making her do anything, Christina protested. She said that she wanted to repay the favor and she started working all on her own. Even if she started working on her own, then you could have just told her that she didn't need to do it. She volunteered out of her own free will because she wanted to repay our help. If I told her to stop, that would just leave Lady Nerissa feeling awkward. Christina was sitting in the chair that Eugene had left by the riverside. She scanned Eugene's spotless appearance before smiling softly. So which tribe was it? Christina asked. The Garung, Eugene replied. Nerissa's shoulders trembled as she listened in on the conversation between them. The Garung are not some small tribe. Did you make sure to kill all of them? Christina checked. What, did you think I would only kill some of them? Or do you think that I should have just warned them of how strong I am and told them they should give up on chasing the elf if they didn't want to die? Eugene asked with a snort of amusement. They probably wouldn't have listened to the warning even if you did, Christina sighed. Probably not, Eugene agreed. Eugene didn't find any enjoyment taking care of such pointless and tiresome affairs either. If at all possible, he had wanted to solve this issue without getting into a conflict. However, the native warriors weren't the type of opponent who could be so easily persuaded. If Eugene had told them that he'd be willing to pay what the elf could have brought them on the market, they would surely have insisted on taking all the money that Eugene had as their price for letting the elf go free. Well, it's not like we're planning on staying here forever. So what did she say? Eugene asked. Christina returned his question. Why don't you ask her yourself? She's too afraid to even make eye contact with me, Eugene pointed out. That's probably because an elf's ears can be a bit too keen for their own good, Christina said with a smile as rose from her seat. Standing up at the same time, Nerissa repeatedly bowed her head to Eugene as she apologized to Eugene. I'm sorry, your great and fearsome lordship. I'm just so overwhelmed. I'm so sorry my ears picked up things that they shouldn't have. What does she mean by things that they shouldn't have? Did I say anything important while I was over there? Eugene mumbled to himself as he headed over to the tent. This large tent was an artifact that had been modified for added convenience, using magic. A simple press on a button affixed to the central pole had the tent folding neatly on itself. Although it was still bulky, that wasn't any issue for Eugene. He stuck the whole tent inside of his cloak and turned to look at Nerissa. So what exactly did you hear? Eugene asked her. Nerissa stammered. Screams and people begging for their lives. Please spare me. You were striking all sorts of poses earlier while acting cool and pretending to be strong. What's with you suddenly begging for your life? So uncool. I am a warrior of the Garung tribe. If I don't return, they'll send pursuers. Moreover, our comrades aren't far away. Even if do spare you, they'll still be sending pursuers. I stole away your prey after all. So if I kill you now, that just means there'll be one less person coming after me. So wouldn't you say that it would be better for me to just kill you now? Don't you agree? Because of me. I'm so sorry for troubling you, Nerissa apologized. It's really more annoying than troubling. Also, did you ever ask us for help? When you came floating down the river, I'm the one who pulled you out of my own volition, and I killed those guys because I wanted to. You didn't even ask me to do so, Eugene insisted as he tucked the clothes that Nerissa had folded into his cloak. Christina spoke up. Will you be carrying her, Sir Eugene? Carrying her? What kind of nonsense are you saying all of a... Eugene trailed off as his eyes turned to Nerissa. He suddenly recalled that her left foot had been amputated. Nerissa's shoulders hunched as she felt Eugene's gaze rest on her and she stood up by herself. I'll be fine, she claimed. I can run well even with just one leg. If I find a useful branch along the way, I can use it as a crutch. So please don't. Please this, please that, can you please stop with all those damned pleases? Eugene sighed in exasperation. Nerissa sobbed. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, but please, can you also stop saying sorry all the time as well? Eugene grumbled with some embarrassment as he summoned a wind spirit. When a gust of wind suddenly caused her to start floating, Nerissa panicked and started thrashing in midair. Tell me if you need to go to the bathroom while we're traveling, Eugene instructed her. Don't piss yourself while pointlessly trying to hold it in. Why yes, Nerissa replied as she gulped down her shock. As an elf, she also knew how to perform a bit of spirit summoning. However, Elves as a race usually tended to allow their innate talents to lie fallow due to their peace-oriented natures. Although she had already lived for a long span of 130 years, Nerissa's spirit-summoning magic was only slightly above the level of a beginner in the art. Elves were just such a race. They lived for a long time indeed, but they spent most of that time chirping with the wild birds of the forest and caring for the flowers and trees. Even so, with how long they lived, an elven archwizard who had lived for hundreds of years was strong enough to make a human archwizard look ridiculous in comparison. Sir Eugene, do you mind telling me how old you are? Nerissa asked hesitantly. If you convert it into elf years, I'm around 200, Eugene answered her. Nerissa was lost for a moment. Huh? Yes, I see. That's truly amazing. Even though you're not that old to be able to freely control the spirits like this, and you're even strong enough to terrify those fearsome warriors. I truly admire you. Nerissa's trembling had settled a little as she stared at Eugene with admiring eyes. Christina, who noticed this look, snorted and shook her head. First she said that you have a face that's so impressive and amazing that even an elf can't compare to you, and now she's saying that she admires you? It feels like you might be hearing more compliments today than you've heard in the rest of your life, Christina noted. Eugene disagreed. Not really. I think I've heard a lot of compliments like that ever since I was young. I've also been told a few times that I have quite the handsome face. In his past life with Hamel's face he'd never once been told anything like that, but after he was reincarnated with this face, he truly had heard those compliments a few times before. Even for Eugene himself, when he was looking at his reflection in a mirror or in a body of water, there were times when he had that kind of thought. What a handsome bastard. Christina suddenly jolted. Hold on, Sir Eugene, you aren't thinking of abandoning her midway just because she might be a burden, are you? I refuse to believe that your personality is that screwed up. Eugene snorted. If I was going to throw her away, I wouldn't have picked her up in the first place. Besides, this makes for a good pretext, doesn't it? We're just protecting a traveling elf and guiding them to the elven village. No matter how fierce the guardian who protects the village is reputed to be, he probably won't reject his own people. At this reply, Nerissa swallowed a sigh of relief. Eugene suddenly turned to her. But anyways, Nerissa yelped, why, did you come here looking for the elven sanctuary that is said to lie at the foot of the world tree? Eugene asked. That was one reason, but I also thought that it would be easier to live in hiding in a rainforest rather than in a city. I wouldn't need to worry about the demonic disease either, Nerissa faltered. Eugene eyed her. But it doesn't look like you've caught the demonic disease. Have you? No. I haven't caught it yet, but who knows when it might happen, Nerissa mumbled as her chin fell to her chest. The demonic disease was a disease that only afflicted the elves. The reason why Sienna, who had been living peacefully within the elven sanctuary, had ended up going out into the world was because of the demonic disease. It was now rare for any elf to catch the demonic disease, but 300 years ago, back when all 5 demon kings were still alive, countless elves had contracted the demonic disease and perished. The elves living in the sanctuary were no exception to this. As such, Sienna had set out from the elven sanctuary. Her mission was to slay all 5 demon kings, and prevent any more elves from being afflicted with the demonic disease. The demonic disease is an incurable illness, Christina muttered. Even with the light of divine magic, it is impossible to treat the demonic disease. Even the demon king of incarceration has been left with no choice but to evade responsibility for it, calling the demonic disease an unavoidable illness. Well, that makes sense. In order to get rid of the demonic disease, all the demon kings and demon folk would have to commit suicide. Eugene gave a repressed response before turning towards Nerissa. Were your parents also born outside of the rainforest? Yes, Nerissa cautiously admitted. This meant that she wouldn't be of any help in finding the place. He held back the urge to say this out loud, but Eugene still couldn't help but think this to himself. Ujicha was a senior warrior of the Garung tribe. He was a towering giant that closely resembled a stone statue. His cleanly shaved head and muscular body were absolutely covered in scars and tattoos. Filled with cold rage, Ujicha turned to look at his surroundings and voiced his conclusion. It was a one-sided slaughter. He had no choice but to judge the battle that had taken place here as such. The tribe's warriors and the Vakahen wolves, they had all been one-sidedly slaughtered. Ujicha slowly walked through the battlefield examining the corpses. Soon Ijicha's eyes lit up. Although the corpses had already been lying there for a few days and had been damaged by monsters feeding on them, the wounds they had suffered could still be made out clearly, mostly because of the variety of blows that had been delivered. A few had been killed by a fist, some slashed by a sword, some others had been stabbed with a spear, others blown to pieces as if they had been within range of an explosion, and still others looked like they had been grabbed by some huge monster and crushed to death. However, unlike the traces that had been left on the corpses, the set of footprints that remained imprinted in the ground indicated that there had only been one opponent. So this was all done by one person, Ijicha mumbled. Ijicha wasn't the only one to have come to this conclusion. A man wearing a large shirt that easily allowed the wind to blow across his skin came on over and stood at Ijicha's side. The man spoke, "So then these brave warriors of the Garung tribe, they truly couldn't beat just one person and even had their prey stolen from them?" "So it seems," Ijicha conceded. The veins on Ijicha's bald head were throbbing in anger. He glared at the man beside him and growled out in a ferocious voice, "I will hunt him down and return with the prey." "Of course you will." The man nodded. "Can't you see how excited our young master had become after being told that you'll be giving him that elf as a gift? If he wants elves, there are others we can give him," Ijicha grunted. "The slave market should be opening again soon. 1 or 2 elves should probably be put up for sale this time as well." It wasn't just the Garung tribe who would be participating in this slave market. Several other neighboring tribes would also be attending. This market, which was held twice a year, traded in tribal criminals who had been sentenced to slavery, tamed monsters and foreigners who had also been enslaved. It wasn't just the natives of Samar who attended this market. Foreign nobles and merchants who had developed close ties to a tribe could also find their way there. That said, their main purpose for visiting wasn't to purchase slaves, but rather to take in this rare spectacle of an event that only took place twice a year. No, other elves won't do. Our young master. Well, he has slightly unusual tastes. He's obsessed with elves who have had a body part amputated, the man admitted with a shrug and a look of embarrassment. You get what I'm saying, right? He's got a bit of an amputee fetish? Something along those lines. He likes it when they're missing a limb or even just an eye. If that's what he wants, then I can just cut them up for him, Ijicha offered. No, I'm telling you that just won't do. If that could work, don't you think that I would have thought of it already? The young master says that he can't get excited by such artificial measures. He needs to know that they were already missing a limb before he gets his hands on them, the man explained. Of course, that one-legged elf probably wasn't born with just one leg, but the young master insists that he wants an elf whose foot was cut off, not an elf whose foot was cut off because of him. So he's just crazy then. Ijicha snorted in disgust. He had no desire to understand the young noble's twisted tastes. The man continued, "Furthermore, if you want an elf from the market, you still need to pay for them, right? Why waste our money on that, when we can just catch that one-legged elf for free?" "Braun. Don't rush me," Ijicha growled. "I'm not rushing you. Did it sound like I was? Well then, I guess I'll let you go about it your own way," Braun mumbled as he kicked one of the corpses. "That aside, his skills must be pretty impressive. My first impression is that he doesn't seem to come from a knightly background. Could he be a mercenary? But what reason could a mercenary have to come all the way here just to wander in the forest on his own? He must be a hunter, Ijicha guessed. For him to have entered this deep into the forest all on his own, he must not be an ordinary hunter, Braun muttered to himself. It's been 2 days since they were killed. We can still catch up to him, Ijicha stated firmly as he ground his teeth in suppressed rage. That's good, the trip has been getting a bit boring. Let's go after him together, Braun proposed. It won't be just the 2 of us, right? It may have been just one guy who killed all your warriors, but he might still have companions. Are you scared? Taunted Ijicha. Me, one of Shimuan's 12 finest, scared? Braun chuckled as he pounded Ijicha on the shoulder. Once he had calmed down, Braun nonetheless reminded Ijicha, it's still better to be on the cautious side. Chapter 96. The Dream 1. One could never predict what would happen in the forest at night. Even a month after they had first entered Samar, Eugene and Christina still took turns standing guard every night. Nerissa had now been added to the initially 2-man party. The elf's sensitive hearing was certainly enough to keep a close watch on their surroundings, but as Nerissa lacked the strength needed to protect herself if it came to an emergency, They couldn't allow her to stand guard all by herself. As such, tonight as well, Eugene and Christina were still the only ones taking turns to stand guard. He didn't know how Christina might be taking his actions, but Eugene still chose to show respect and consideration to Christina in his own way. Generally speaking, the first and the last watches of the night were the most convenient. So every day Eugene gave up the first and last watches to Christina, and took on the most difficult watch in the middle of the night. A small voice suddenly called out his name, "Sir Eugene." That alone was enough to make Eugene's eyes snap open. He then easily got up from his sleeping spot without showing any signs of fatigue. Christina was crouching down just outside the entrance to his erected tent. "Any report to make?" Eugene checked. Christina shook her head. "Nothing happened. Monsters roamed this forest at night. Under the usual circumstances, the camp should have already received several attacks from these monsters, but Christina's barrier was able to hide their camp from the monsters' perception. That said, they couldn't just blindly trust the barrier and not stand guard. While Eugene was rather unreliable in other matters, when it came to things like this he was always thorough. This was because, during his time wandering around as a mercenary, there were more than a few times where he had ended up in danger when some foolish mercenaries he was working with had let their guard down while on the night watch. "Don't you feel tired? After all, you were quite active today." "I'm not feeling that worn out, so why don't you just sleep in for today?" Christina offered. It seemed that Christina was showing such consideration because he had been forced to deal with the warriors of the Garung tribe earlier today. Eugene just smirked in the face of Christina's concern. "In the first place, I didn't even get enough exercise to wear me out," Eugene reassured her. "I'll be sure to wake you up in 5 hours, so don't worry about it and get some rest." Christina didn't argue any further and just nodded. When she had yet to become as familiar with Eugene as she was now, there had been several times where Christina continued arguing with Eugene over similar matters. But by now she had learned better. When it came to matters such as these, Eugene would always refuse to back down. It wasn't that Eugene was ignoring the consideration that others showed him, but it was just that he was extremely strict with the standards that he had set for himself. "Hey. Well then, I'll be counting on you," Christina said with a bow of her head as she withdrew from the entrance to his tent. After roughly grooming his bedhead with only his hands, Eugene left his tent. It had been a good idea on his part to prepare several tents. After checking that Christina had entered her own tent to rest, Eugene took a seat in front of the campfire. Nerissa was sleeping in one of his spare tents, which had been set up on the other side of the campfire. Ahem. Eugene let out a cough as he flipped open his cloak and pulled out a book. The book was a magical textbook that he had already read several times now. He had received this magical textbook from Lovelian on the day he left Arath. "I should have sent a letter to Teacher Lovelian when I had the chance," Eugene regretted. In his heart he sincerely respected Lovelian as his teacher. The fact that Lovelian was older than him, even when he added the age of his previous life as Hamel to his current years, only deepened his respect. For Eugene, this was a very important reason for why he should respect Lovelian. Quite some time had passed since he started reading. The forest at night was far from quiet. The sounds of insects chirping were very loud, and each time the wind blew, the thick branches of the trees shook against each other. He could even hear the sounds of monsters from just a short distance away. Ahem. Eugene coughed again. Ever since their first day camping in these woods, Christina had revealed herself to be a deep sleeper. Today proved to be another example of the same pattern. Christina had fallen asleep as soon as she had turned in for the night, and only the sounds of calm breathing could be heard from her tent. Eugene let out a sigh and folded his book closed. "Is there something you want from me?" These words weren't addressed to Christina, who was already fast asleep. The tent on the opposite side of the campfire shook slightly before the flap at the entrance slowly rose. Nerissa peeked out of the tent. I'm sorry. I told you to stop saying you're sorry," Eugene reminded her. Nerissa's shoulders drooped at this response. Eugene calmly pushed some more firewood onto the campfire. "Is it because the forest is too noisy?" Eugene asked. "Or is it because, after going through so many things today, you're so afraid that you can't get any sleep?" Nerissa stayed silent. "Well, let me just say this, as I'm afraid that you might be having some strange concerns. I have no intention of abandoning you while you're asleep. It's not like I'm taking care of you solely out of my own goodwill. I'm protecting you because I need you for something," Eugene persuaded her. That's the case then. Like I thought. Nerissa's eyes wavered as she muttered to herself. After a few moments of hesitation, she suddenly nodded as if she had come to some kind of decision. I don't mind if it's with you, Sir Eugene. What? Eugene grunted. I've been expecting you to make such a request and I've prepared myself for it. Nerissa suddenly blushed and stammered, "Aw no wait. Rather than expecting, it's more like I thought that something like this. Well, it's not like it can be avoided, so instead of going to sleep I've been waiting for you to." Eugene interrupted her. Hey now, hold on a moment, I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at. You've been expecting something? Something that can't be avoided? So you were waiting? For me? Waiting for what exactly? Well, I do have a lot of scars on my body and with my missing leg as a flaw, I might not be able to satisfy your standards, Sir Eugene, Nerissa admitted in a depressed tone. Why would having scars on your body mean that you wouldn't be able to satisfy my standards? Eugene stiffly asked, his cheeks twitching with suppressed outrage. Nerissa gasped and started to shake. Then after taking a few deep breaths she hesitantly asked, Could it be that you prefer a body with a lot of scars, Sir Eugene? Eugene wasn't an idiot. He could guess what kind of scenario Nerissa had envisioned, and what she had been expecting of him. Having lived as a slave, she had definitely gone through many difficult situations, so it wasn't like he couldn't understand why she would have come up with such an idea. But Eugene was still left feeling extremely upset. Hey, I have no plans on crawling into your tent, and I have no intention of getting you to repay your debt to me with your body, Eugene clearly stated. Huh? Nerissa uttered, gobsmacked. Just what kind of person do you see me as? Geez, a kid like you really dares to say just about anything, huh? Eugene scoffed. At these words, Nerissa's jaw dropped open. Had he actually called her a kid like you? Nerissa was 130 years old. Of course I'm aware that you have lived a longer life than me, but if we convert your age into human years, you're still just 13 years old, Eugene insisted. Yes, Nerissa muttered as she stared at Eugene for a few moments, then she straightened her posture and bowed her head to him. I'm really, truly grateful to you, Sir Eugene. I told you that there's nothing to be thankful for. How many times must I tell you that I'm just taking you with me because there's something that I need from you? Eugene asked. You're talking about the guardian of the elven village, right? If I do manage to meet with the guardian, I'll make sure to tell them that I've been receiving great kindness from you, Sir Eugene, Nerissa promised. Of course you should make sure to tell them that. Although I might know who that guardian bastard is, if that bastard tries to turn me away because I'm a human, you'll have a very important role to play. You get what I'm saying, right? That means that you need to keep him from escaping even if you have to throw yourself at his feet. After saying this, Eugene opened up his magical textbook once more. Even as Eugene continued to ignore her, Nerissa kept looking at Eugene with a gaze filled with admiration for his righteous words and deeds. With a handsome face like mine, it's a lot easier to charm these elves, Eugene mused. Strictly speaking, he wasn't really trying to charm her, but Eugene felt that the result was still somewhere along those lines. The night continued to pass. After 5 hours had flown by, Eugene swapped shifts with Christina and crawled back into his own tent. Although he didn't really feel the need to rest, Eugene still closed his eyes and went to sleep. Even if you didn't need to take a break just then, you should still rest when you can and catch some sleep if you have the chance. Eugene was familiar with these habits from his previous life. It had been a while since he last had a dream. Usually he didn't really have clear dreams. Whenever he went to sleep he fell into a deep, dreamless slumber that still allowed him to immediately wake up when he needed to. Dreams just left the mind feeling more tired than when they started. For that reason, Eugene didn't really enjoy the act of dreaming. Whether they were happy, sad, or just ordinary dreams about everyday life, dreams weren't reality. Eugene did not know why people dreamed, but what he did know for a fact was that dreams couldn't take the place of his reality. In his previous life, after defeating the Demon King of Fury, their journey to fight the Demon King of Incarceration had been one long nightmare. After all, their target was the second-ranked of all Demon Kings. Like his ranking suggested, the Demon King of Incarceration had both powerful subordinates and large armies under his command. One of these was the Queen of the Night Demons, Morgiabella. Strictly speaking, she wasn't truly subordinate to the Demon King of Incarceration. Although she hadn't yet reached the extent to where she could be called a Demon King, even back then, Morgiabella was a powerful demon folk queen who had vast numbers of night demons serving her. During their journey to reach the Demon King of Incarceration, Norgiabella had repeatedly attacked Hamel and his companions. She was hellishly tenacious, constantly appearing in their dreams rather than confronting them in reality, trying to break the spirits of Hamel and his comrades. Thanks to these experiences, Eugene was wary of dreams, hated nightmares, and truly loathed all night demons. Norgiabella's attacks had tormented their party to the point where their pain was comparable to all that they had suffered while clashing with the demon kings of carnage, cruelty, and fury. And in some ways, dealing with her was even more terrible than fighting against a demon king. Eugene realized that he was feeling a strong sense of alienation from his current dream. This had to be some kind of lucid dream, as Eugene was fully aware that he was currently in the middle of a dream. However, even though he could recognize the fact that he was currently dreaming, Eugene wasn't able to use his will to exert any control over the dream. Caught in this dream, unable to effect any changes, Eugene was just left standing there aimlessly. Could this be an attack of a night demon? Eugene suspected. Trapped in a dream where he didn't have any control of his surroundings, Eugene felt on edge. With his memories of his past life intact, Eugene's mental power was strong enough to shrug off any ordinary attacks. Yet even so, Eugene hadn't been able to notice when these changes were made to his normal sleep pattern. For a night demon to be able to interfere with his dreams so subtly, it had to be quite a high-ranking one. Since when did I get pulled into this dream? Eugene trailed off. In order to try and stay calm, Eugene decided to focus on something else. I am Eugene Lionheart, the reincarnation of Hamel Dinas from 300 years ago. I am the son of Gerhard Lionheart and the foster child of Gilead Lionheart. I am the disciple of the Red Tower Master Lovelian. He didn't seem to be having any problems with his memory. This dream, it feels somehow different from a night demon's attack, Eugene realized. This wasn't an assault. It didn't have the unpleasant, sticky sensation to it that a night demon's attack usually had. The dream world shook around him. Eugene gasped. Although it was his first time seeing it, the scene being brought to life in front of him seemed somehow familiar. He was now in the middle of a spacious underground cavity. In front of him, a large, muscular hulk was carrying a statue several times the size of his own body. It should be fine here, the giant figure said. What do you mean it should be fine? A woman scolded him. The center of the room is a little further than that. No, go back. Sienna, what do you think? Sienna sobbed out a reply as she looked down from where she was floating. A little hic to the right. Ether. The man suddenly stopped as he felt a liquid drop onto his head. How amazing. It's actually raining this far down underground. Hamel. Is that you? Have you come to visit us from your place of rest and shed these tears? Don't cry, Hamel. I won't ever forget you. The woman sighed. Molen, please don't say something so foolish. The things that are falling on your head right now aren't raindrops. They are Sienna's tears. Oh, indeed. I thought they were a bit too salty to be raindrops. Don't drink them, you stupid bastard. Why the hell are you swallowing my tears? The woman comforted her. Don't cry, Sienna. Hamel also wouldn't have wanted you to weep for him. Hamel, that son of a bitch. Why did he have to die like that? Just why? He didn't need to die. If he had just turned back. Sienna trailed off, her anger suppressed by her sorrow. Sienna. Hamel was a great warrior who I have no choice but to recognize. He was a greater warrior than I, Molen of the Buyur tribe. Hamel, he must have wanted to die as a warrior. Sienna was goaded into a fury once more. He wanted to die as a warrior? Don't bullshit me, Molen. It doesn't matter how you die, you're just dead. What difference does it make whether you die as a warrior? Instead of dying as a warrior, it would be better to just live as a human being. With a gasp of realization, Eugene stood there blankly as he watched this scene take place. It really wasn't his first time seeing this location. This was Hamel's grave, which had been dug deep beneath the Nahama Desert. This was a scene from when the grave was first being built. Molen erected the statue. After checking its appearance, the woman, Anise, slowly dragged her feet over to one of the walls. Hamel, you have bad posture. What are you saying all of a sudden? I'm saying that it doesn't reflect well on all of us. I know that your childhood education was cut short and that you've been a mercenary for a long time, but since you'll now be traveling with us, you need to fix your bad posture. Why should I? You're really asking why? Don't you understand what kind of position you're in? Hamel, you're a companion of the Master of the Holy Sword, he who is recognized by the Holy Empire, the hero Vermouth Lionheart. And I am the Holy Empire's saint, Anise Slywood. Alright, and I'm Hamel Dinez. Why haven't you introduced my name? I am Molan Roar, proud warrior of the Buyur tribe and the son of its chieftain Darak Roar. Shut up, Molan. Idiot. Hamel. Don't you think that you were a little too harsh on Molan? You also looked at Molan just now and told him to shut up, didn't you? However, I didn't call Molan an idiot. Even if you're not wrong in calling Molan an idiot, don't you see that it's very disrespectful to call a fool to their face? I'm not an idiot. Hamel, it isn't just your posture that's bad, the way you conduct yourself is also flawed. You're just too vulgar. Don't you think that you're being a bit too harsh? Correcting your behavior is also important, but if you keep your mouth shut for now, at least people won't be able to tell what kind of cesspit you have for a mouth. 1. So let's just fix that bad posture of yours for starters. And what's so bad about my posture? You're doing it right now. Don't cross your legs. Sit with your back straight. Your feet, make sure not to drag your feet. That creates an unpleasant noise. When you walk, you need to keep your shoulders back and your chest out. Now for your knife. Pay attention to your knife. You need to hold it lightly like a pen. Where in the world would you find a madman who uses a knife like an axe when he's just cutting the meat on his plate? You're looking at one right now. In the early days of their party, Anise had hounded Hamel for quite some time, hoping to fix his behavior. It hadn't proved to be a wholly pointless effort. Although his normal words and actions went unchanged from start to finish, thanks to Anise's troublesome and persistent corrections, Hamel had at least managed to absorb and ingrain some table manners. Despite having done all that, Anise was dragging her feet herself right now, and walking along with her shoulders slumped too. Each time she dragged her feet, a scraping sound could be heard from the ground. Hick. He was crying. Anise was actually crying. The Anise who was always smiling brightly, even as she drove knives into other people's hearts. That Anise Slywood was really crying for him. Almighty God of light, please protect and watch over this foolish lamb. Please lead him with mercy and love on his arduous journey to his final resting place. And should darkness fall onto this lamb's path, please illuminate the way forward with your light. Even as she wept, Anise carved these prayers onto the wall. Please burn away all the remaining burdens left from his life with your flaming torch. Instead of the door behind which only pain and despair awaits, please open unto him the door of heaven, which is full of peace and happiness. If his good deeds are not enough to qualify for his entrance into the kingdom of heaven, please place the cost of the difference onto my shoulders, so that we can someday reunite with each other in the same afterlife. Molan stood in front of the statue that had proudly been erected in the center of the room. His lips were squeezed firmly shut as he stared up at the statue. But why was he now taking his clothes off? Was he feeling hot? That's right, deserts did get pretty hot, and when you needed to cool down, Eugene guessed that the fastest way to deal with it was just to take your clothes off. Molan was just that kind of person. If he was hot, he took his clothes off, if he was cold, he put some on, if he was hungry, he ate, and if he was thirsty, he drank. And if there was an enemy in front of him, he would charge right at them no matter how strong the enemy was. Molan. Block them. If someone gave him the order, Molan would rush over and block the enemy without any hesitation. Hamel. That was why Molan was now weeping. There wasn't any complicated reason for his tears, it was just because he was sad. Sad enough that tears were welling up inside him, and that was why Molan was crying. I wanted to have a match with you someday, to decide between you and me, which of us was the greatest warrior. Molan was the type of guy to just go along with his desires, but he hadn't been so direct as to challenge Hamel to a fight. There had been a very simple and natural reason why Molan hadn't done so. Because Hamel was his comrade. His friend. If they wanted to decide which of them was the greatest warrior, they would need to go all out in their fight without holding anything back. That was the only way they would truly be able to test each other's skills. But if they did that, one or even both of them could have been seriously injured. That was why Molan hadn't challenged Hamel to a duel. Even if he did have the thought of deciding which of them was the superior warrior, he didn't want to fight with all his might against his fellow comrade and friend Hamel. Molan was just that type of guy. I've never really fought with you. And from now on I'll never get the chance to fight with you again. However, Hamel, even without having fought, I know the truth. I truly respect you, Hamel. You're a greater, braver and stronger warrior than I am. As for Sienna, without saying anything, she just floated down to the ground and sat on the spot. Ever since earlier, from the start of the dream, in fact, Sienna had been crying. Even now she was still weeping. Tears were pouring down her face and dampening the floor. In between sobs, Sienna said, "If you didn't die, if you had lived, that would have been enough. Hamel. We could have been happy. More than anyone else in the world. We deserve to have happiness." She had told him that she wanted to live an ordinary life, get married like an ordinary person, have a few children, then live to see herself become a grandmother. Do you know, Hamel? People are saying that we're heroes. The heroes who saved the world. Huh. While rubbing her reddened eyes, Sienna looked up at the statue. Hamel. I'm sure you would have hated those words. Because you're a son of a bitch and you have a shitty personality as well. You probably would have cursed out anyone who called you a hero. Heroes? How could we be called heroes when we weren't even able to slay all the demon kings? I'm sure that's what you would say. Sienna continued to laugh even as she kept crying. We didn't manage to complete our quest. It couldn't be helped. That's right, of course we couldn't do it. Because you were dead. That's why, Hamel, please don't resent us too much. Even if it's not now, it might be impossible right now, but... Sienna clenched her fists. Someday. That's right. Someday we will definitely do it. So that when they call us heroes, we can actually be proud of such a shameful title. Someday we will be able to meet each other again in the world that you have been longing to see. Sienna turned her head to look behind her. Because he made an oath to that effect. Behind her stood Vermouth. Vermouth was staring at the statue with a slight distance between him and the others. His face was completely blank. It was a look that Eugene had become used to seeing on Vermouth's face. Sienna glared at Vermouth as she waited for a response. That's right, Vermouth eventually said. That was the reason for the oath. An oath that only you know the full details of, Sienna muttered reproachfully. After a few moments, Sienna stopped glaring at Vermouth. I'm sorry, Vermouth. I'm just too agitated right now. Let's write him an epitaph, Vermouth muttered as he lifted his hand. He activated the spatial magic that Eugene had seen him use all the time. From a wide gap that seemed to have been torn into space, a large tombstone fell to the ground. After all, every grave should have a memorial stone, Vermouth murmured. Hamel Dinah's Sacred Calendar 421-459. Vermouth reached out his hand and wrote Hamel's name onto the tombstone. Staggering up onto her feet, Sienna walked over to Vermouth. Hesitating, her eyes shifted left and right between Vermouth and the tombstone. I want to write something below that, Sienna finally said. All right, Vermouth agreed. He was a son of a bitch, an idiot, an asshole, a douche, a piece of trash, Sienna read out as she wrote. Vermouth hesitated. If that's all you write down, I don't think we can call it a memorial stone anymore. You can just write down whatever you want to write below this, Sienna insisted. Then I'm next. Molen, who had been shedding thick droplets of tears, abruptly got up from where he had been sitting and walked over to them. You're not wrong in saying Hamel was a son of a bitch, an idiot, an asshole, a douche, a piece of trash. But he was also brave. As well as brave, he was faithful. He might have been an idiot, but he was wise. He was great. They all wrote down their words onto the memorial stone. After placing the memorial stone down in front of the statue, Vermouth muttered, "Let's move the coffin." Vermouth walked over to the coffin that lay behind him. I'll lift it, Molen said, stepping forward. But Vermouth shook his head. No. Let me carry it. Anise broke up the argument. Don't even think about doing it all on your own. Everyone, wouldn't it be better for all of us to lift it together? Molen, get down, Sienna ordered. Molen frowned. Why do you want me to get down? Because you're a lot taller than us. Since it's impossible for us to carry the coffin together with you, you should get down on your hands and knees so that we can put the coffin on your back. That way we can help lift it from the sides, Sienna explained. Are you really telling me to crawl with the coffin on my back? A warrior shouldn't creep along on the ground. Can't you even do that much for Hamel? Well, if it's for Hamel. As soon as Molen started getting down onto the ground, Sienna panicked and kicked Molen in the shin. Can't you tell that was just a joke? There's no need for you to crawl on the floor. You just need to bend over a bit so that we can carry it together, Sienna exasperatedly stated. The dream began to shake. Anise noticed something. Sienna. That necklace. The coffin. Sienna hesitated. No. I'll take it with me. That goes against the agreement. Haven't we all already agreed on this? As the dream kept shaking, he saw Sienna tighten her hold on the necklace. After creating the world that Hamel wanted to see, at that time, I'll give it to him. Oh Lord. Anise put her hands together and began praying. Please avert your eyes from this immoral act. If you truly aren't able to overlook this, please place any further burdens on my shoulders, so that we may all ascend to heaven. So in that way, I hope that you allow us all to meet once again in the same place. Anise, do you really think we can all go to heaven? Sienna asked. If we're not able to get there, then who in the world is worthy of going to heaven? Anise insisted. But our tribe's afterlife might be a different place from the God of Light's heaven, Molin brought up worriedly. It's no different. Heaven is. All heavens lead to the same place. We will surely be able to reunite in paradise. If that isn't possible then, Anise paused slightly as she stroked the white coffin with a sad smile. Then that just means God does not exist. Ah, Eugene gasped as he opened his eyes. After staring blankly up at the roof of his tent for a few moments, Eugene slowly pulled himself up. Fuck. The cloak of darkness had been wrapped around Eugene like a blanket. But the holy sword Altair was somehow protruding from his cloak, and the hilt was resting in Eugene's hand. Chapter 97. Why am I holding it in my hand? Was Eugene's first thought upon waking up. After taking it out of the treasure vault, he had swung it a few times to learn how it felt in his hand, but he had yet to use the holy sword in a battle. The reason for this was simple. The holy sword was too eye-catching. The needlessly ostentatious ceremonial sword stood out even when he was just holding it in his hand, but when he infused his mana into it, it actually started emitting a brilliant light. The tribespeople of Samar were savage and greedy. It wasn't just them either. There were a lot of other dangerous people roaming Samar. As long as it wasn't in Helmuth, Eugene had the confidence to be able to protect himself no matter where he went, but he didn't want to attract too much attention before he was done with his goals here. That was why he had used a fake identity card and had also used magic to dye his gray hair black. As for Altair, it might be the one and only holy sword in the world, but Eugene had no intention of drawing Altair while in Samar. This meant that Eugene had kept it inside his cloak all this time and had never once taken it out. So, why was he now holding Altair in his hand? Could it really be that Altair had fallen out of his cloak while he was tossing and turning in his sleep? Or else was it possible that he had some kind of sleepwalking disorder or an obsessive-compulsive disorder that he had never even noticed, causing him to unconsciously pull out a weapon while sleeping in such a dangerous place? There was no way that could be the case. Feeling distressed, Eugene rubbed the corners of his eyes with his fingertips. Fortunately, he hadn't shed any tears. That must have been because he already shed a lot of tears during his first visit to the grave. However, even if he hadn't shed any tears, his emotions had yet to subside. He might have already woken up from his dream, but the memories of his dream and the scene that he had seen there weren't fading away. It was as if he had really been with his old companions in that moment so long ago. Though if you really think about it, I was with them. His deceased corpse had also been present at the scene. Well, my corpse was lying inside the coffin. But the scene that I saw in my dream, could it really be just a delusion? It had seemed far too realistic for that. Sienna, Molin, Anise, and Vermouth, their appearances were just as Eugene remembered them, and their behavior wasn't much different from what Eugene had imagined when he had first seen the statue and the memorial stone in his grave. But instead, that makes it even more likely that the whole dream might be just a figment of my imagination. If the dream wasn't just a product of his imagination, if something like that really had happened 300 years ago, then why had it appeared to him in a dream now? Was it you? Eugene said as he glared down at Altair. The dream he had just experienced was something different from a night demon's assault. Night demons didn't create dreams like this when attacking their prey. If it had really been an attack from a night demon, he would have realized it in his sleep. Right, fine then. Eugene had already confirmed the truth. The dream wasn't an attack meant to break his will. It had only shown Eugene no Hamel scene that had taken place after he died. And when he had woken, Eugene was holding Altair in his hands. Was this a revelation? Eugene asked as he lifted Altair up for a better look. The holy sword didn't respond to his questions. I don't even believe in gods, so would that guy really send a revelation to someone like me? It had also been different from what he had imagined the usual revelation was like. Shouldn't a revelation from God be a bit more awe-striking, while warning about something that might happen in the future? But the dream that he had been shown wasn't of the future, but of the past, and from the distant past 300 years ago at that. Eugene muttered to himself, I don't know what the meaning of this is. What are you trying to tell me? Sienna. That necklace. I'll take it with me. That goes against the agreement. Haven't we all already agreed on this? After creating the world that Hamel wanted to see. Allow us all to meet once again in the same place. Someday we will be able to meet each other again in the world that you have been longing to see. We will surely be able to reunite in paradise. Visit. For the best experience. If that isn't possible then that just means God does not exist. Eugene tightened his grip on the necklace. This necklace had been taken away by Sienna, causing Anise to say that doing so was against the agreement. Sienna had replied that everyone had already agreed on something. However, that necklace had somehow left Sienna's hands and found its way into the Lionheart clan's treasure vault. Found you. 1. Just what in the world was going on? If they were going to show him something, they should at least make it clear. You could have at least shown me something that I haven't already figured out myself, Eugene said to himself resentfully. But what was going on between Sienna and Vermouth? Just what kind of promise had Vermouth made with the Demon Kings? And where had everyone ended up now? Were Vermouth, Sienna, Anise and Molin all still alive? While feeling a deep sense of frustration simmering within him, Eugene placed Altair back inside the cloak and then left his tent. Something else was simmering on the outside as well. It was a clear soup packed full of vegetables and mushrooms, and the one doing the cooking was Nerissa. While the person who was on the last watch, Christina, was in principle responsible for taking care of breakfast, she had left it up to Nerissa to boil some soup while she sat in the warm sunlight and offered up her morning prayers. Was it you? Eugene accused. Taken aback, Christina said, What are you saying all of a sudden? I'm asking if you're the one who entered my tent while I was asleep? Eugene clarified. How shameless. Sir Eugene, just what kind of person do you think I am? Why would you accuse me of going into your tent? Christina's eyes narrowed as she turned to face Eugene. Indeed, there was no reason for her to do so. If Christina really had entered Eugene's tent and stuck her hand into his cloak, there was no way that Eugene wouldn't have noticed that. Changing the subject, Eugene pointed out, You're the one who's supposed to be doing the morning duties. Christina defended herself. I was going to do it, but Nerissa offered to help. That isn't on the level of just helping someone. Isn't she doing it all on her own? The ingredients and the cooking tools were all provided by me. Eugene was struck by her shamelessness. I'm also the one who prepared all of those things. I even picked the mushrooms too. Sir Eugene, let's not get tripped up by such trivial matters. But what in the world are you doing so early in the morning? Out of nowhere, you suddenly started suspecting me and even accused me of doing something so shameless. Could it be that you saw my figure in your dreams? Christina asked him with a small smile on her own face. This look of hers caused Eugene to recall the appearance of Anise that he had seen in his dream. Their excessive resemblance to each other was becoming quite a problem. Even so, his reply came without any hesitation. No, Eugene flatly denied. Anise and Christina were two different people. Still, it bothered him. They might be two different people, but perhaps Christina was actually descended from Anise. It might be because of the sight of Anise with tears dripping down her face that he had seen in his dream, but Eugene felt like he should treat Christina with a little more kindness. However, before that he decided to ask her a few questions about the Holy Sword. After using magic to block the sound from spreading so that Nerissa couldn't hear them, Eugene spoke. Hey, about the Holy Sword, does it sometimes move on its own volition? As far as Eugene knew, the Holy Sword had never shown any sign of moving on its own during his previous life. What are you saying all of a sudden? Ah. Christina replied with a bewildered expression, but all of a sudden she let out a gasp as her eyes lit up. She placed her hands together in front of her chest and looked up at Eugene with reverent eyes. Sir Eugene, could it be that you have received a revelation? Christina asked. Eugene hesitated. No. I guess I was just daydreaming. So the Holy Sword had communicated the voice of our God to you, Sir Eugene, Christina stated confidently. Eugene denied it. It wasn't the voice of your God, but... Sir Eugene, Christina interrupted him. Please don't ignore the clear sincerity that lies within your own soul. Although you might say that you don't believe in God, the truth is that you really do have faith in Him. Please stop deceiving yourself. There's no need to feel ashamed. Visit for a better user experience. When have I ever felt ashamed? It's only natural for humans to be afraid and shy away from the dark. Sir Eugene might be a bit coarse and unscrupulous at times, but since you're still at quite the immature age, it's not unusual for you to be afraid of the dark. So our benevolent God looked into your heart and came to you so that you would not need to fear the darkness. Eugene stayed silent as Christina continued to get carried away. Because that is what Sir Eugene subconsciously desired. I am not afraid of the dark, I can overcome the dark. Such desires caused Eugene to grab onto the holy sword, a miraculous artifact bestowed by our merciful God. With its help, Sir Eugene was able to fall asleep in the warm light of the holy sword, and in his dream he received a revelation from God, Christina said devoutly. That's right, Eugene agreed. I did receive a revelation. God did appear in my dream, and do you know what he said? At these words, Christina clasped her hands together with a shining expression on her face. She cheered, indeed, so that really was the case. Sir Eugene, what message has God passed on to you? He said to look at you and tell you to shut up, Eugene claimed. Christina was struck dumb. And about the God that appeared in my dream, he was really ugly. No, he far surpassed the level of normal ugliness. He looked just horrible. It looked like he was covered in a mixture of cockroaches, centipedes, and maggots. He had the head of an orc that seemed to have been scarred in a fire, and he made queak sounds whenever he spoke, Eugene calmly described. Sir Eugene. Whenever Christina gets too chatty, queak, and seems to be lacking in logic despite the torrent of words, tell her to stop using faith as a substitute for eloquence, queak, and don't use the name of God to back up her own claims, queak. Please just shut up, Christina hissed. Eugene had thought that he should treat Christina a bit more kindly from now on, because she resembled a niece, but it looked like that was impossible. The soup is done, Nerissa called out. All right, Christina responded, calming down. Isn't there any meat? Eugene asked. Nerissa's soup proved to be quite tasty. It should be about time for our pursuers to catch up with us, Eugene mused. It had been 3 days since Nerissa had joined them. That should be the case, Christina agreed. The place where Eugene had fought with the warriors of the Garung tribe was a little outside of their tribe's territory. However, after 10 warriors who had gone out on a hunt had failed to return, and when their prey had been a highly valuable elf at that, there was no way that the tribe could simply overlook this issue. What did you do with the corpses? Christina asked. I burned them, Eugene answered. Of course he had done so. Pointlessly leaving their corpses intact would only make it easier for their chasers to catch up. Eugene had burned all the dead warriors and Vakan wolves with magic, so that not even a bone was left. But seeing as they haven't caught up even after 3 days, it seems that they're having a hard time keeping up with us, Eugene observed. The forest was very large and every inch of it was dangerous. The tribes who lived here despite this were bound together by a complex web of interests. The Garung were undoubtedly a savage tribe, but that didn't mean that they could so easily intrude into someone else's territory. This was part of the laws upheld between the tribes. If they wanted to remain as a tribe of Samar, it was best for the Garung to follow these laws obediently. However, the chief warrior of the Garung, Ujicha, had no intention of doing that. This horrific-looking bald man had ambitions that did not lose in magnitude to his massive muscles. Those born in the forest could only be raised in the forest and eventually die in the forest. But just like most tribes, the Garung tribe nevertheless had some ongoing ties with a few upper-level figures in the outside world. Their contact to the outside world was Count Kobal of the Sea Kingdom Shimuan. The Garung tribe operated a small mine which had started to produce mithril a few years ago. Visit for a better user experience. This led Count Kobal to eye the high-quality mithril produced from this mine owned by the Garung tribe. But he didn't just want to get his hands on the mithril, he wanted to purchase the mine itself. Since the mine had started to produce mithril, there could also be other precious ores resting within. In order to get to them, the mine first needed to be properly developed, but it was impossible to develop a mine by just blindly picking up a pickaxe. The natives who were born in the forest and were only familiar with hunting didn't have the knowledge needed to develop the mine. They barely had the capability to mine the iron or that was used to make their weapons and tools. In order to develop the mine, Count Kobyl was even willing to mobilize some dwarven craftsmen. However, no matter how enthusiastic their side was, the Garung tribe had no intention of selling the mine that had been in their possession since the time of their ancestors, or of allowing outsiders to develop the mine. This was the stubborn decision of the Garung tribe's last chieftain. But the chieftain was old. Ujicha saw his opportunity to drag the chieftain off of his throne and become the chieftain himself. After that, he could sell the mine for a large sum of money. To Ujicha, it didn't matter if these outsiders came in and developed the mine. He had no intention of being stuck in this forest as the chieftain and growing old like that. Strength might weaken with age, but the power of money would never grow weaker with the years. Ujicha wanted to use his connection to Count Kobyl to leave the forest. He wanted to cross the vast sea and live a luxurious life in a shining city. In order to ensure such a future for himself, Ujicha was forced to cater to the poor tastes of this chubby little boy beside him. Although Ujicha was rather unable to respect or understand this noble's twisted desires, he still couldn't afford to refuse or ignore the latter's orders. When Ujicha usurped the chieftain and announced his willingness to sell the mine, Count Kobyl had sent his sworn knights and his own son to Samar. Dojarang Kobyl, the count's son, looked like a pig walking on its hind legs. However, to Ujicha, this piglet had a pair of wings. By satisfying Dojarang's voracious desires, those wings would allow him to fly to his splendid future. Dojarang deeply wanted to possess the one-legged elf. He was enraged by the fact that their hunt had failed. He mocked the warriors, calling them fools for failing to capture a single elf. Then, while saying that he couldn't trust them any further, he had insisted on following them on their hunt. The fact that they hadn't been able to catch up to the elf, even after 3 days had passed, was partly because of the piggish noble's complaints. After walking just a few steps, he would whine that he was hot. If they gave him a ride on a wolf's back, he would start throwing a fit about how it was smelly. And when they tried to run just a bit faster, he would start screaming that his stomach was churning. If Dojarang hadn't been the count's son, he would already have been killed. But every time Ujicha felt a surge of killing intent, Braun, the sworn knight accompanying Dojarang, comforted him. Just hold on for a little bit more. I'll be sure to tell the count how much you suffered to keep his brat happy, Braun promised him. Are you sure it's worth it? Ujicha asked in a skeptical tone. No question about it. The count is very appreciative of talented people. With your skills as the chief warrior, and all the thoughtful gifts that you have prepared for the young master. The count is sure to value you, Braun said with a wicked smile on his face. Fine then, if you're still unsure, why don't we do this? Before you sell the mine, make sure to come to Shimuan at least once. Let me introduce you to some of the ladies I am intimate with. All of the ladies are from aristocratic families. If it's a man like you that I'm introducing to them, the ladies are sure to be interested in you, and if you're successful in developing a relationship with one of them, then you might be able to become a noble right away. These soothing words managed to calm Ujicha's rage. Right, he just needed to hold on for a little bit longer. Their pursuit was indeed a little slower than they had planned, but they had still managed to find traces leading to the thieves that had dared to steal the tribe's prey. Lord Ujicha called out a warrior who had just returned from scouting ahead. Some unknown youth is waiting for us up ahead. Is it a member of the Yabong tribe? Ujicha asked. They were currently in the territory of the Yabong tribe. As dozens of warriors from another tribe had invaded their territory, it was only natural for the warriors of the Yabong tribe to come out and confront them. The Yabong tribe wasn't a tribe that would need to bow its head when facing the Garung tribe, but if the two tribes were to clash with each other, they were both sure to suffer significant losses. As such, once they explained the situation, the Yabong tribe should allow them to continue on their path. After all, warriors from the Garung tribe had been killed and their prey stolen. Although the Yabong tribe might be outraged by the Garung tribe's temerity in not sending an emissary in advance to seek permission to pass through their lands, that didn't matter to Ujicha. For Ujicha, whose plans for the future lay outside the forest, the problems of following the laws of the forest and balancing the relationships between the tribes didn't matter in the slightest. It's not a warrior of the Yabong tribe, the scout reported. Could it be one of the thieves' companions? Ujicha suspected. Having noticed that they were being pursued, the thieves may have left one of their comrades behind to block his way. With a bloodthirsty smile on his face, Ujicha mounted his wolf. Ujicha growled. It seems that they're being arrogant just because they managed to kill a few of our warriors. Even if the boy wasn't one of the thieves, it didn't matter. As long as he wasn't a warrior of the Yabong tribe, that meant that there was no need to show him mercy. Should anything block their way, they just needed to clear the path and keep on going. When are you going to catch the elf? The fat pig, Dodgerang whined. His lips twitching, Ujicha turned to look at Dodgerang and said, "It seems that a comrade of the thieves who stole the elf is waiting for us up ahead. We should go see him, young master." "Why should I? I don't want to. I want to stay in the shade." "We're all heading there together, young master. If we're able to capture him, that means we'll be able to find the elf even faster. If you wish to stay here and rest, the capture of the elf might be delayed even further." "Ah, really?" Eventually Dodgerang got up from his chair with a sigh. Ujicha was planning to brutally kill the guy blocking their path ahead. By doing this in front of Dodgerang, he hoped to terrify the brat into obedience. If he could manage that, then Dodgerang's attitude, which had already driven Ujicha to the point of murderous rage a few times, would probably improve slightly. "Kia!" Ujicha called out. Dozens of wolves raced through the forest. Chapter 98. The wolves came to a halt. It was just as Ujicha had been told. A man was sitting down right in the center of the bumpy forest road. "I am Ujicha, the chief warrior of the Garong tribe," Ujicha shouted pompously as he got off his wolf's back. "I am searching for the thieves who dared to steal our tribe's prey. Have you seen any elves with just one leg?" The man didn't respond. His body was wrapped up in a large cloak and he even had the hood pulled up so his face couldn't be seen clearly. "Answer me," Ujicha demanded as his voice lowered into a growl. Even though he had made sure to use the common language, the man didn't respond. Ujicha took the man's silence as confirmation of his guilt. The moment that Ujicha raised his hand, the wolves began to growl. Dozens of warriors surrounded the man and blocked his escape routes. "A hunt? Are we going to be hunting?" Dodgerang's voice rose slightly in excitement. Dodgerang, who only felt desire for women with physical impairments, had no interest in running around on his own 2 feet to hunt, but he did like watching others hunt and examining the corpses of their prey. Brawn, I want to get closer to. If that bastard tries to take me hostage, make sure you stop him." "Got it?" "Yes, young master." Brawn had no intention of trying to stop Dodgerang. It wasn't the first or the second time Dodgerang tried to do this sort of thing, so Brawn was used to it. "Tell me about your comrades," Ujicha ordered as he grabbed the hilt of the great sword that was strapped to his back. "Where are they taking the elf? If you tell me what you know about them and lead me to them, I might just spare your life." "This bald bastard. What gives him the right to decide whether this guy lives or not? There's no way, no way. Kill him. Tear off all his limbs and kill him." Dodgerang squawked out in a childish outburst. Ujicha ground his teeth and glared at Dodgerang in frustration. "Ahaha." The man who was sitting in the middle of the road started laughing, his shoulders shaking. As he pounded his knee in amusement, he shook his head and said, "To think that I would get a chance to see a piglet wearing a silk robe that doesn't fit its status and a golden collar today. Where the hell is he seeing a piglet?" "Brawn. Did that bastard just call me a pig?" "He did, didn't he?" "I'm sure of it. He looked at me and called me a pig. See, catch him and bring him to me. Make him bow down in front of me." Dodgerang screamed as he threw a tantrum. Now, young master. Please calm down. Even without the young master prompting me, you'll soon be able to see quite the enjoyable sight." Having said this, Brawn turned to look at the man. You should be careful with what you say." "What reason do I have to be careful? I have no intention of listening to your orders and I'm not going to beg you to spare my life. Since that's the case, we're sure to end up fighting here and now," the man said as he stood up. Ujicha smiled, revealing his yellow teeth. "Is that so? So that means you have no intentions to give us the information on your comrades and the elf?" "I can tell you this much," the man offered, a golden light flashing within the dark depths of his upturned hood. "The warriors of your tribe were all trash. Even though they claimed to be warriors, they were all ridiculously weak. Also, they were petty and cowardly. Do you know just how pretentious they were when they first met me? Do you know just how quickly their bluff was called and how many tears they shed in the end as they begged me for their lives? Do not insult the warriors of the Garong tribe," Ujicha growled out as veins throbbed on his skull. Seeing this sight, the man burst into laughter. Once he had calmed down, he said, "I'll give you a chance." "A chance?" Ujicha parroted. "If you give up your pursuit and withdraw right now, I'll allow you to do so instead of kicking your ass. You can go back and keep on wiping that ugly pig's ass," the man said. "Kill him." "I said kill him." Dodgerang's eyes rolled angrily in his head as he screeched. Now that it had come to this point, Bronn also couldn't keep up his smile. Bronn did feel a similar disgust towards his juvenile young master, but he was nevertheless a knight who had sworn allegiance to the Kobold clan. Ujicha. I'll take care of this, Bronn said. Ujicha hummed as he nodded in agreement. He still needed to take out his anger at the tribe's warriors being insulted, but he could take his revenge on the other thieves who were probably escorting the elf. Right now it was better for him to concede this chance to Bronn, out of consideration for Bronn's injured dignity. The latest understudies are on underfiv.website. My name is Bronn Jarak, Bronn declared as he stepped forward and grasped the sword hanging at his waist. I am a knight sworn to Count Kobold of the Shimuan Kingdom. Bronn Jarak. So it was you. One of Shimuan's 12 finest, the man realized, letting out a short sigh as he nodded his head in recognition. The Shimuan's 12 finest was a term used to refer to the 12 most skilled knights in the Shimuan Kingdom. Bronn arrogantly admitted, that's right. Although it's embarrassing to admit, I can be called one of the 12 finest. As for you, you nameless ruffian, it's too late to regret it now. The sin of insulting the young master of the clan that I have sworn my loyalty to, you'll pay for it with your... It's good that you understand your place, the man interrupted Bronn with a smile. It's only right for you to feel embarrassed. As one of Shimuan's 12 finest, that means you only measure up when it comes to the knights of your own country, right? Furthermore, you, Bronn Jarak, are the youngest of the 12 finest, so what gives you the right to act like you're so amazing? I'll make you feel such terrible pain as you die that you will regret ever being born, Bronn promised as the smile disappeared from his face. He drew the long sword that hung from his waist and pointed it at the man. I won't be following the code of chivalry in this fight. This is not a duel between knights, and as you have failed to respect my honor, I see no reason to respect yours. That's why I hate knights, the man said, his golden eyes curling up in a smile. They're always much too wordy. Just how much longer are you going to keep chatting away? Let's start by cutting off an arm, Bronn thought as he stepped forward. With just that one step he was able to instantly narrow the distance between them and stab out with his sword. This rapid thrust was the ultimate expression of Bronn's prided quick sword technique. Ugh, Bronn groaned as his body shook violently and he lost his sense of balance. There was a simple reason for this. Namely, the arm that he had used to thrust his sword had been torn clean off. See, the man said, his cloak still swaying slightly from when he had made his move. The golden eyes beneath his raised hood were smiling as he commented, You're so weak that you deserve to feel ashamed. You... Bronn's face contorted as he desperately swung his other hand at the man. He was no longer holding a sword, but Bronn attempted to slice at the man with sword force wrapped around his bare hand. However, that arm was also torn off. Yet it didn't fall to the ground. Instead, each of Bronn's arms were held in one of the man's hands. This meant that the man had destroyed Bronn's sword force and ripped off Bronn's arms with just his bare hands. But it seems that you still didn't know your place well enough, the man said regretfully as he let go of the arms that he was holding. Then he reached out slightly and grabbed Bronn by the stomach. Ugh, arg, arg. For the next few moments, Bronn wasn't even able to release a proper scream. Each time the man loosened and reapplied his grip, Bronn's thick waist was forcefully squeezed thinner. Crack. When the man finally fully clenched his hand, Blon's body had been split in two. One of Shimuan's 12 finest, Bronn Jarak, died just like that. Dodgerang's mouth fell open at this sight. Ujicha was even more shocked than Dodgerang. He recalled the corpses of the warriors who had died a horrible death. His comrades had their faces punched in, they were sliced by swords, stabbed by spears, blasted by explosions and even crushed to death. He had made a mistake. The warriors weren't actually sliced by a sword or stabbed by a spear, nor were they hit by an explosion. As for those that had been crushed, he had dismissed what these clues were pointing to as mere nonsense, but it had turned out to be the truth. Ujicha realized that the tribe's warriors had all died to this man's bare hands. After all, he had just seen it happen right in front of him. Bronn had been picked up and crushed to death by this man with just one hand. See now, just why did you keep following me? The man asked with a smile. As he flicked away the blood that had spilled onto his sharp fingernails, he continued. I told you not to follow me, and that was after I even kindly left those corpses behind as well. After seeing those corpses, that should have been enough to frighten you away from coming after me. Ujicha faltered, "That's fish. That goes for you as well." The man interrupted him. Ujicha, chief warrior of the Garung tribe. The wolves had lowered their tails in submission. The monster's innate ferocity had shriveled down to nothing in the face of their overwhelming terror. It wasn't just the wolves either. All of the warriors there were trembling from their instinctive fear of death. "I'm going to die," Ujicha realized. The latest studies are on website. He had a gut feeling that no matter what he said he wouldn't be able to make that monster in front of him back down. His luxurious life in the city, his glorious future. All of that would end up lost with his death. "It's time." The man moved. Ujicha squeezed his eyes shut. They had a slight problem. They had confirmed the existence of the village that was said to have been built by the wandering elves. Although the deceased informant, Jackson, hadn't been able to tell them anything, according to the dark elf they had caught, the elven village wasn't just a rumor and it definitely existed. But how were they supposed to find it? Even the dark elves weren't completely certain of the village's location. The only thing that they knew was that the village was somewhere deep in the forest, near the territory of the Ajan tribe. None of the dark elves had been able to approach the village. They had been terrorized by the Guardian. 300 years ago, the elves had truly detested the dark elves. The elves declared that all dark elves were traitors who had forgotten their duties as an elf and had corrupted the essence of their race by cozying up to the demon kings. No. The times had changed greatly. During the era 300 years ago, the whole world hated the demon kings. For the elves who were dying from the demonic disease, the demon kings weren't someone to whom they could plead for their lives, but instead an eternal enemy who had already slain much of their race. However, the present era didn't find the demon kings as detestable as it had 300 years ago. People wouldn't be stoned to death just for following the demon kings like in the past, and they wouldn't be hunted indiscriminately just because they were warlocks. The same went for the dark elves. It couldn't be helped that they were viewed with disgust, but they weren't an object of unconditional hatred either. After all, dark elves born after the oath was sworn couldn't help but be seen as victims of injustice. It was all because of the demonic disease. Those who had caught the disease were faced with only two choices: become a dark elf or enter Samar. If they weren't even able to defend themselves, going to Samar would leave them with no choice but to risk being enslaved. But if they became dark elves, they could be freed from the shackles of the demonic disease and even receive Iris's protection. Ultimately, it was up to the individual to decide whether or not to become a dark elf. They all had the choice of whether to live as an elf or as a dark elf. Eugene was not able to accept such a decision himself, but he felt like he could understand how things probably looked from an elf's point of view. However, the Guardian didn't show any such tolerance towards the dark elves. He just gathered the wandering elves and protected the village. Any encroaching hunters were mercilessly killed, and the same went for dark elves as well. The Guardian did not recognize the dark elves as his kin, though this was a rather outdated view in these modern times. But it was an outdated view that suited someone like Eugene. No Hamel. This probably means, Eugene started to imagine what the Guardian he had yet to meet looked like, that the Guardian must be well over 300 years old. It was just a vague guess. He should be in his 400s at the very least. Elves as a race derived no enjoyment from killing things. He also probably took part in the war. Elves usually refused to kill their own people, but elves and dark elves were different. At least, that was the conclusion that the Guardian must have reached, which meant that the Guardian likely hated dark elves so much that he had no choice but to feel that way. 300 years ago, the dark elves did many things that left the elves with no choice but to hate them. Elves were originally a race that loved nature and was loved by nature. When the demon kings started raising their armies and spreading the demonic disease, many elves participated in the war against the demon kings. The elves used the mountains and forests in various sites as their battlefields on which to fight against the armies of demonic beasts and demon folk. In response, the demon king of fury used a very simple and yet effective tactic to deal with these elven rangers. He formed a dark elf corps led by Iris. Visit for the best experience. At that time, the elves were still hesitant to kill the dark elves. They considered the dark elves as poor innocents who had been corrupted by the demon kings. They thought that they might be able to save the dark elves, or at least persuade them to coexist. But the dark elves led by Iris left the elves with no choice but to hate them. She set about burying all those forests and mountains. As Iris had once been an elf, she had a good grasp on the character of these elves. Even as the elves screamed in pain, burning alongside the forests and mountains, they refused to run away. For them, the most important matter wasn't to save themselves, but to instead put out the fires that were ravaging the forests and mountains. I don't know the location of the village. Dark elves can't even get close to the village. That was what the dark elf who had been made to confess had said. The guardian, he brutally kills all dark elves. He makes them kneel, then he slices open their stomach and pulls out their intestines. Then he takes the long intestines and pulls them out as far as he can before leaving them to die. That guy is crazy. It might just be a vague guess, but these words had made Eugene feel confident that his suspicions about the guardian were correct. That was the method Iris used whenever she executed someone. In order to instill fear in her opponents, Iris had made sure to kill the elves in a brutal fashion. While giving them the choice of whether to live as a dark elf or die as an elf, she would force her elven captives onto their knees and make them watch as their own comrades suffered this cruel execution. Nerissa, who was still being carried by the wind spirits and floating in midair, suddenly gasped as her body began to tremble with excitement. Sir Eugene, I can hear a song. So that really was the case, Eugene muttered to himself without any surprise. The elven village had been expertly hidden. Under such circumstances, he had been speculating how they would go about guiding the wandering elves to enter their village. Could they have left some clues out in the open that only an elf would be able to notice? A song, you say, but I can't hear anything though. Eugene continued to mutter as he sharpened his senses. He was certainly not an elf, but he was proud of the fact that his ears were as sharp as any of theirs. However, even as he circulated his mana, he still couldn't hear the song that Nerissa was talking about. Hesitantly, Nerissa described it. This is, well, instead of my ears, it's more like I'm hearing it inside my head. Just like magic. Can you tell which direction it's coming from? Eugene asked. From deeper inward. Yes. Nerissa shrugged her shoulders. Then she turned to look at Eugene and Christina with a helpless expression. Hesitantly she continued, well. Sir Eugene? What is it? There's a voice inside my head. It's telling me to say something to you. Say it. It wants me to tell you that you should leave me here, and go back, Nerissa reluctantly admitted. And if we don't withdraw? Eugene asked with a smirk. At these words, Nerissa pulled a tearful expression and seemed hesitant to respond. Just say it, Nerissa, Eugene reassured her. If you continue traveling with me any further, it says that it will kill Sir Eugene and Lady Christina. Nerissa tearfully conveyed the message. Is that so? Eugene burst out with a huge laugh as he called over the wind spirits carrying Nerissa. If you want to kill me, then you'll just need to come out in person. Eugene directly took hold of Nerissa and started carrying her. For now, let's start with meeting him, then we can plan our next step. The guardian might just be someone that Eugene had met in his previous life.